On April 12th, for the third time, Alexander's house was buried in rubble. When he dug himself out, literally carving a way through the debris, he crawled outside and thought that the whole neighborhood was on fire. He realized that one more artillery strike would cause the building to collapse completely, so he decided it was time to flee the besieged Mariupol. All of this happened because the area between Meotida and Azovstal had become the front line. I can only guess what miracle helped them to survive through those bombing, but they made it through the night, and when the fighting quieted down in the early morning, they headed in the opposite direction, hoping to break through the front line and escape. They crossed the Azovstal street into the courtyards, trying to reach the sea. They followed the map here and somehow survived. It was a pure luck second time. But suddenly they saw Russian soldiers in the distance. It was a standard checkpoint. On the 13th, Russia had already announced its fully controlled Mariupol, so there were checkpoints on every street and intersection. Alexander thought they wouldn't shoot, maybe they just interrogate and rob them and let them go, but at one point Alexander felt as if he stumbled. Then he realized his own heel was pushed up against his back. It wasn't a stumble, it was a gunshot. He looked at his wound and realized that he wouldn't be able to walk anymore. In his video though, he says he didn't feel pain, just anger. For 45 days he had been surviving in basements, scavenging for water and food, dodging shelling, and now he gets shot just like that. Since running wasn't an option anymore, his neighbor dragged him toward the Russian soldiers to surrender. And here is a crucial point: if you look tough and dangerous like this guy, you will never pass the Russian filtering. But Alexander and his friend looked like regular workers, so they had better chance. When Alexander was dragged up to the soldiers, the first thing he asked, "Why? What for?" A Russian soldier answered, "I just didn't like you." At that moment Alexander had a lot of questions running through his head. If you didn't like me, search me, send me to the jail, interrogate me, why shoot me? But he calmed his down and asked for a tourniquet to bandage his leg. The Russian soldiers gave him a tourniquet, but it was old, rotten Soviet one. When Alexander tried to tighten it, it broke. He was stunned and asked for another one, but they refused. The Russian just laughed at him and pointed toward the Kadyrov's troops, who were supposed to have medical help. By the way, the Kadyrov's forces are often called TikTok warriors, because they spend more time filming videos of themselves pretending to fight than actually fighting. But there was a problem. The Kadyrov's troops were about 400 meters away. Alexander couldn't walk, he was weak and losing blood. But his friend said he would carry him and found a wheelbarrow. They put Alexander in the wheelbarrow, but his leg was hanging, so they had to secure it. Alexander remembered a Ukrainian soldier once taught him some tactical medicine. They tied his leg to a board and used an improvised tourniquet. They wrote down the time, 10 AM. On the map, the distance was only a 5-minute walk, but in those conditions it took an hour and a half. Everything around them was burning and falling apart. There were trees, poles and craters everywhere. But the most dangerous part was the unexploded munitions. About 20% of all shells don't explode right away, and with Russians' old Soviet ammunition that number could be 30%. They had to carefully push through all that. Every movement caused a pain, so Alexander beat down on a stick and suffered, dreaming of some painkillers. This was Komsomolsky Boulevard when they finally reached the Kadyrovtsi, and a nurse came to meet them. The first thing Alexander asked for was a painkiller, but the nurse said, "You're gonna die anyway, so there is no point in helping you. We are not allowed to help civilians." But in the end she agreed to bandage his leg. While she was doing it, she told him, "If you don't get to a hospital by midnight, you'll die." At that point one soldier saw them and said, "Why are you bothering with him? You should just finish him off," and he aimed his gun at Alexander. In that moment Alexander understood everything. He yelled out, "Do it! Finish me off! You've been tormenting me for 45 days and now I have no chance of survival, so do it!" The Kadyrowicz was shocked. He probably expected Alexander to beg for his life. So instead, he pulled out a radio and called someone. 5 minutes later, a black car with mercenaries from self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic arrived. They took Alexander to the nearest town. After Mariupol, Alexander was interrogated and forced to sign a false statement, saying he was shot by a Ukrainian sniper. Then he was taken to Donetsk, and after spending 4 months there, he eventually managed to escape to Europe and shared his story. And if you wanna hear my story about my first encounter with the Shahed 136, you can check this video. I was lucky to survive this thing.